evening, everyone. Welcome to the Music Box. Yeehaw! My name is Mike Miller. I'm the managing partner here at the Music Box, and I've been hosting this series now for 10 years, guys. So, how old is this book, Laura? Like 8 years? Maybe? 9 years. And look, you all came out for it. That's great. Listen, guys, I'm very excited. Actually, next week, a similar topic, one a little bit closer to my heart. Sorry to say this, Laura, but lost pubs of Cleveland. I think I have single-handedly visited more pubs in Cleveland than anybody in this room. If you want to stop and start listing them, I will challenge you because I've been to so many pubs. It's one of my favorite things to do. So next week is a Cleveland pub crawl. A great book. So if you haven't read it, very funny. And the week after that, how many have been to a Mike Polk night? All right. Tell everybody else around the room. This is a very different night, guys. Mike Polk and a fellow by the name of John Skirdick from the Cleveland Public Library. He's the head of collections. Cleveland Public Library has the largest collection of historic Cleveland photos. So John goes into the library archives, digs out a bunch of old photos, sends them to Mike Polk. Now, Mike Polk is a reporter, or actually a news announcer on WKYC, but he's been rated Cleveland's top stand-up comic for years and years. He's hilarious, and he's a Clevelander. And so it's a slideshow, just like you were seeing before tonight's. And you'll see a historic photo that no one has seen in decades. And the librarian will start telling the story behind the photo, and the comedian will have a different point of view. It is hilarious, guys. That's on Wednesday, February 25th. Okay, we have a show it's free. It's a night this Saturday. A week from Saturday. We thought this would really be something special. We got permission to show Mad Dogs and Englishmen, a movie concert with Joe Cocker, who just got into the Rock Hall. If you have never seen this movie, it's got Leon Russell, it's got Rita Coolidge. He has a giant gang of singers and supporters in this movie. It is rated by many as the best concert film of all time. So this is Saturday, February 21st, a week from this Saturday. Again, we have a great projection system, but more importantly, we have a great sound system for this movie. So we've been doing this for the last 6 or 8 weeks. We've been 6 or 8 months, holding a monthly free movie night. And I think you guys should consider coming to this one. How you doing, Laura?
Great. Thanks for having me here.
Oh, no worries. Yay, Laura.
And thank you, everybody, for coming out tonight.
All right. Now, I know you did this 9 years ago when the book first came out. We did the night on this. And you might not remember, I always start out these nights with the same question. Where were you born? Where'd you grow up? Where'd you go to school?
I was born in Cleveland, Ohio. Lived in West Park when I was very little. Grew up in Middleburg Heights. I'm a lifelong Clevelander. I went to John Carroll University.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
Now, what'd you come out after John Carroll? What'd you come out and do?
So my first job after John Carroll made me convinced I didn't want to do that job anymore. I was a technical writer for healthcare insurance accounting manuals.
Okay.
Fortunately, I had already been doing...
So you were close to suicide?
Yeah. It was great. You know, it's great to get a job right out of college, of course. So then I had been doing freelance writing for Scene magazine. Everybody here knows Scene. But, that was the old Scene, you know, and it was like the quatrefold. Mark Holen was the editor. So I'd been, you know, really trying to get into the writing field, and I got a job at Cleveland.com not long after that, and that sort of started my career in journalism and feature writing.
All right, cool. And you really were you did a lot. I mean, she wrote some articles about us. That's how we got to know each other. You know, in kind of arts and other stuff.
And that's when I was at the Plain Dealers. I was at Cleveland.com. I went to Free Times, another great long gone publication. I loved Free Times. The office is over there on Coventry, across from Tommy's, or next to Tommy's.
It was easy to find a little marijuana on the streets. Anyways.
Yeah. And then Plain Dealer for many years, and that's how you and I met, when I was at the Plain Dealer.
Right, yeah. And your husband also wrote a couple articles about us over the years, and that was very cool. All right, so guys, again, the reason I decided to do this is, one, we had the same size crowd 9 years ago, but this book is a forever book. You know, you can pick this up at any time and get into it and read, you know, some of what we've lost here in Cleveland. And, you know, those things just don't change. So to me, this is still a very relevant topic. So how did you kind of discover? This is really kind of a national or international series, right? Lost London.
Right.
Right? So how did you come across this?
So let's go back to 2016. You know, everybody's been doing that, right, on social media the last few months. So in 2016, I was working at the Plain Dealer. Great year in Cleveland. And I had been writing a series of articles about lost buildings and architecture for the paper. And I really wanted to do more than just write for the newspaper. It was great. I had a wonderful editor, John Kappas, who encouraged me, you know, to write these stories. But I wanted to do more than that. And I had been reading a book about lost London, and I discovered this series about lost architectural heritage. And remember, I said this is 2016. So I, on a whim, wrote to the publisher of these books. It's a publisher called Pavilion Books. They're in London. And then I discovered Lost Berlin and Lost Detroit and Lost Los Angeles. And I said, you know, I am from another great city in the world, Cleveland, and I think you should do a book about Cleveland. And the publisher, or the editor, to my great surprise, like I'm a complete stranger writing to him, he got back to me within a day, a British man named Frank, and he said, you know, we would love to do a book about Cleveland. And I was like, oh my God, I'm so persuasive. But I have to give LeBron a little bit of credit for that, because Cleveland had been in the news so much that year with both the championship and then the RNC had been here. So we were on the global stage in 2016. And so Frank said, you know, we had another book fall through for 2017. And it's a really tight publishing schedule. But if you think you can pull this together in a year, which is, you know, if you've written a book, it's pretty hard, because there's more than 200 photos in there, which meant I had to look at more than probably 1,000 photos to get those 200. I said, yes, I wanted so badly to write this book about Cleveland and put it on really the global stage. So that's how Lost Cleveland came about.
All right, perfect. All right. All right, so this is, I'm almost answering my own question here, but do you think Clevelanders are a little bit more nostalgic about their city than residents are of, like, Akron?
I don't know about Akron, but I think we are more nostalgic than a lot of cities that have gotten more attention, probably more than, you know, people in Philadelphia or New York or Berlin, because I think those cities have been recognized as great cities and we haven't. And I think we have kind of an inferiority complex. I do think that we know that there's so much great history here. You know, we were once the 5th largest city in America, you know, and we have this great infrastructure. And John D. Rockefeller was here, and we had this great city, and we still do. It's a different city than it was, but we haven't been appreciated on that stage. So I think we are nostalgic, and because we're more proud. I think we're proud of what we had, and we want people to know about Cleveland, what we had and what we have, because it's a great city.
Yeah, I agree with all that. I think, and I do think, especially in the last 10, 15 years, there's been kind of a rising of our own pride. I've seen it in the crowds we get on this series. You know, people want to hear about the history and are embracing, you know, that it is still a very important city and it has an amazing history. So.
Absolutely. I work today at Greater Cleveland Partnership, which is the Chamber of Commerce, and we see this every day. There's so much great stuff going on in Cleveland, and one of my jobs there is to lead their storytelling, basically, to tell people, like, we've got all of this going on now. We had that. We have this. And what I really find through work and also through, I have a college-age daughter, through her and her friends, is that younger generations don't have the negative sort of preconceptions about Cleveland that older generations or my generation might, because they never knew, like, Cleveland, like, decline, really. They see it as this pretty cool city that they're living in.
All right, very cool. All right, so let's jump into the book. And literally, chapter 1, or section 1, or story 1, was about an amusement park I had never heard of until I saw it in your book, the White City Amusement Park. Now, this closed in 1908, so it's tell us a little bit about, what'd you dig out about that place?
Yeah, so when we, there's a couple of topics that are really popular in Cleveland history, and amusement parks is one of them. And not far from the most popular park ever, Euclid Beach Park, which you might want to talk about a little bit later, was White City. It was only there for about 5 years. I do have some pictures in the book, and it was pretty much all in white architecture right on the lake there.
Right, lake where? You say there?
Right by Euclid Beach Park, so about East 140th, around there. Water rides, regular rides. They had standards were different then. They had some animal acts that ended kind of tragically. An elephant died there and things like that. That's terrible. But yeah, it's amusement parks were really sort of a great social equalizer. Like, it was an affordable way for people to go out, and I love to look at the old pictures of people at amusement parks, especially then. So that was like right around the turn of this century, 1900. So, they're wearing suits and hats and long dresses to the park. So it was very, very briefly, but it did, there's some, again, you want to look in the book later, there's some beautiful pictures of it from there.
Yeah, okay, but let's slide right into, because she and I were talking. I asked her, were you ever at Euclid Beach? And she said no. It was before my time. And I almost lived there,
Yeah.
Seriously, my dad, that was his favorite thing to do on Sundays. And we would go 3-4 times a summer easily. So you have a great chapter on Euclid Beach and great pictures.
Yeah, so Euclid Beach Park was so special to so many people because it was there from 1895 to 1969. And, depending on your age, you remember different things, maybe the flying turns, maybe Laughing Sal. Anybody remember Laughing Sal? Mike and I were talking about that earlier. I don't remember Laughing Sal, but I've seen the pictures and I'm still scared. The beach house, nobody in this room remembers the beach house because that was from about 1910. The carousel, which still lives on over at the Western Reserve Historical Society. But what's interesting about Euclid Beach Park and why it lasted so long was because, unlike White City or Luna Park, there wasn't a gate fee, so you could just go in and pay for the rides that you rode, or buy a popcorn ball or a custard, things like that. So it was a little more affordable to go to. Also, it almost didn't exist because it wasn't opened by the Humphrey family. It was opened by some other investors. And in about 1900, it was actually going to go out of business. And a man who was selling popcorn in the park, Dudley Humphrey, got together some family money and he bought it. And of course, the Humphrey family famously owned Euclid Beach Park until 1969.
And we've actually had one of the grandsons of the Humphreys as a storyteller, and he lived on the grounds. But what an important part of the story to me is it really was, pretty risque in its early years. I mean, it was a lot of drinking, a lot of partying, just, how you define amusement. Okay, but the Humphreys buckled down and said, no, 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 no. They ended all that. And it became truly a family park. The most amazing part to me is they physically built all the rides themselves. They didn't hire contractors to build it. It was built by the Humphreys and their relatives. They didn't care much about safety, but it was pretty amazing to me. It's an amazing story for Cleveland.
It's interesting you said that. They did clean it up. It was an alcohol-free park. They may have gone a little too far. Up until the 1960s, they were known to measure women's skirts going in. I mean, a little too much there. If people had even seen you at a bar earlier, you might not get in. So, there was a little bit of a puritanical streak going on there.
But it cleaned it up, and I think it was what allowed it to survive.
Absolutely.
It was going to close down, and they created some, Flying Turns was an amazing ride that they designed.
And it really was just the changing times in Cleveland that caused it to end too. It wasn't anything they did. The buses to Euclid Beach Park from Public Square stopped in the early 60s. It was harder to get there. And I mean, if you know anything about Cleveland history, late 60s, 70s was a really dark time. A lot of job loss, suburban flight, things like that. So it was just cultural, larger factors that led them to close.
Yeah, I agree. All right, let's pop over to some other of your chapters. Doan's Corner. Yeah. I bet you a lot of people don't even know what that place is. It's literally lost.
It's literally gone. Yes, it's actually the cover of the book, if you've seen it. So, interestingly, I am working on a new project. More on that later. And I was looking at a map of Cleveland from the early 1800s yesterday, and Doan's Corners was on there. That's because this neighborhood, which really was Cleveland's second downtown, went back to the stagecoach era. It was around Euclid and 105th, so where University Circle and Cleveland Clinic are there, right around there. And it was a man named Nathaniel Doan. He opened a tavern there. So it was on the Buffalo Stagecoach Road, so literally the road, people rode to Buffalo. So then, post office came and taverns, of course, you have to have taverns on the Stagecoach Road. And then a little neighborhood grew up, but it really wasn't until 1911 when the Alhambra Theater opened, and then Keith's 105th Street Theater opened, that it became the second phase of Doan's Corners. And this became such a vibrant area. There were jazz clubs and people lived there. There were lovely apartment buildings there. If you know Judson Manor today was from that era. It was it's a wonderful retirement community now, but at the time it was Wade Park Manor. It was called the height of metropolitanism. Even in New York, it was so luxurious there. And so it was this hotbed of people living and going out and movie theaters and theaters. But then after World War II came, people, they moved out of the city. They had cars. They didn't want to live in such an urban neighborhood. And Cleveland's second downtown largely vanished then.
And what's funny is University Circle is sometimes now called the second downtown.
Right.
It has developed so much, almost right on top of it.
Almost right on top of it. There was a chapter between these two things, though. In the 60s and 70s, a black businessman named Winston Willis bought a lot of that property, and he did open up some restaurants and theaters there. And if someone asked me what the Scrumpy Dump was, I don't know if you saw a picture of a theater called the Scrumpy Dump earlier. That was a theater that he owned. A lot of the theaters in that neighborhood, it's true, were XXX, but that was not. It was a theater that played blaxploitation and Kung Flu Fix. But he, and I believe he's still alive. Last I heard a year or two ago, he was still alive, very elderly. He had some problems with tax evasion and so on, and most of his property ended up being taken away in the 80s, and that's really when sort of UCI, University Circle, and the clinic sort of took over that area. But it did have this second vibrant neighborhood there. It was a different neighborhood than, the Stagecoach one, but it did have a lot of a second life. And now it's in a third.
Now it's in its
Yeah.
third. Oh, perfect. All right, another fun chapter for me. I've heard about this, and I loved reading about it. Was the Great Lakes Exposition, which was in Cleveland from in 1936 to 1937. So it was almost its own city too, correct?
It was, and is gone without a trace. So obviously 1936, height of the Great Depression, 100 years since Cleveland had officially been chartered. So civic leaders thought they wanted to do something to pull Cleveland out of the Depression, to bring people into the city, to give them something to do. So they had the idea of doing something called the Great Lakes Expo, and it was based on the Chicago World's Fair, but it was more regional in nature. In large part using WPA help, they built a 135-acre city down on the lakefront, right around where Municipal Stadium was, so right around there, up through 9th Street. And it was gorgeous. It had Art Deco buildings and great architecture and all these pavilions dedicated to different states or businesses. Like Ohio Bell had a pavilion, for example, where you could go in and look at these exciting telephones that they had, and you could take blimp rides. And they actually built about a 5,000-seat aquacade because synchronized swimming and things like that were very big at the time. So people could go see Billy Rose's aquacade shows, and Ethel Merman came, and all these celebrities came. Meinhardt Robb, a year away from being the most famous munchkin in the world, performed there. Jesse Owens signed autographs there. So they built this amazing city down on the lakefront. And also, think about it, 1936, so the torso killer is running around town. It's the Great Depression, and still, over 2 years, 7 million people visited this fair. They saw all those fun things I was just telling you about. And also, again, pointing how sensibilities were a little bit different. They also went to see shows of things called the 260-pound ballerina troupe, where it was all, large women, or there was they called it, this is what they called it, the midget dance troupe. So anyway, all sorts of unusual entertainment. New dancers. People got to try fruit from Florida at the Florida Pavilion. So it's this great, cool thing down on the lakefront, but it was never meant to be permanent. And all of it was demolished in September of 1937. They began, except for the Donald Gray Gardens, which some of you may have seen that, because that was around until the 90s down by Municipal Stadium.
Oh, wow. Cool. Well, one of the things I caught my eye in the slideshow you provided was the theatrical and the area around Short Vincent. Again, another place that I actually got to go to because it was one of my dad's favorite bars in Cleveland, and
You had a fun childhood.
I know.
Yeah.
I can go on and on. So tell some stories about the theatrical. And the Short Vincent,
Right.
where it was I've done nights on the Short Vincent, and it's just an amazing history.
Yeah, I think it's good to talk about the whole street because I call it Cleveland's shortest street, but has the biggest reputation. Short Vincent actually went back to the late 1800s when a hotel called the Hollenden Hotel opened at the corner of East 6th and Superior, and out the back door of that was Vincent Street, which was very short, so hence the name. And that wasn't a 1,000-room hotel. So all of a sudden you had thousands of people coming out the back door, and what do they need? They need bars and taverns and restaurants. So all this nightlife developed. So, this is going back to late 1890s, and it just continues to grow and grow. But it was in 1937 when Morris Mushy Wexler, a bookie, bookmaker, he and some of his friends opened a bar known as the Theatrical. So that really was the most famous place on this street. And it was a jazz club, and they did bring in lots of great entertainers, but it wasn't really the music that brought people in, it was the clientele, because of course you had your Irish mafia, your Jewish mafia, your Italian mafia all hanging out there and getting along there. This was kind of like Switzerland for the mob in Cleveland, and the mob was very very vibrant in Cleveland, let's say. And you had sports stars there hanging out. People from out of town, would come in there, like Yankee stars and so on. Celebrities would come in. Joe DiMaggio was known to go have a drink there. And you had, actors and actresses. So it had a reputation far beyond Cleveland. Like, people would go there. Like, when you were in Cleveland, you would go out to the theatrical. And in one of the most famous nights, or famous, yes, I was going to say infamous, but it's famous, nights there in 1972, that's where Nick Milletti signed the papers to keep the Guardians, which were then the Indians, in Cleveland. So all of these really important things happened there. And meanwhile, so you have the theatrical. It's this great nightlife place. And you might see Shonda Rhimes or Danny Green or, Marilyn Monroe or, Frank Sinatra went there inside. And then out on the street, you have all these other bars. You have a peep show place. It wasn't really a red light district, but it was a little bit, right? Close to that. So it was this exciting street, probably the best nightlife street Cleveland has ever had, right? Would you say?
Most famous. I mean, of course, we had the Flats in its heyday in terms of nightlife, but what occurred there was, it was just a sensation.
Very compact. Roxy Burlesque was right by there. Yeah. So really what happened to that was, in the 60s, Cleveland was trying to clean things up. But it was also just, development. Central National Bank and then National City Bank went in, and most of the street ended up being demolished for that. And I think, probably the most sad story in Cleveland preservation history is that the theatrical is now a parking garage.
Yeah.
It literally is a parking garage. So, but as one of my friends pointed out earlier tonight, there's a lot going on in that area again. Like, Fidelity Hotel opened up on East 6th at the end of it. It's so cool. It goes back to the 1920s. So it's a little bit of that flavor of what Short Vincent used to be.
Yeah, I agree. All right, another great chapter, and I'm fascinated by this history, is Leo's Casino. You go back out to near University Circle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so often when we talk about music history in Cleveland, we talk about Record Rendezvous or Cleveland Arena, and as being reasons that the Rock Hall is here, and that's very true. But Leo's Casino deserves a lot more attention than it gets. This was such an important club in Cleveland and really American music history. It was at 75th and Euclid, in a hotel called the Quad Hotel. So Leo's Casino actually opened in Central Avenue in the 50s, but in 1962, it moved to the Quad Hotel at 75th and Euclid there. So think about this, 1962, a pivotal year in music, right? Being located so close to Detroit, this club kind of started as a jazz club, but they started to get all of these great up-and-coming Motown acts coming through. You may have seen in the slideshow the Supremes, before they were the super famous Supremes, so young and beautiful, Aretha Franklin. Otis Redding played there the night before his last show ever before he died was there in 1967. Red Fox, Dick Gregory, and Dick Gregory called Leo's Casino the most integrated club in America that he had been to, and that's because it really was. It was the rare club, and it was located on the edge of the Huff area, where black and white Clevelanders mixed and mingled, and they went to see the same shows. It was a very welcoming place because it was just about the music there. And in fact, on one of the nights of the Huff riots, the Supremes were there, and they had 3 sets to do that night. The first 2 sets were fine. The police stopped the 3rd set, but that's not because of any problems in the club. They were just trying to get people out of the neighborhood. So Leo's Casino is so important in music. But really, its success kind of led to its downfall because all of these acts became so famous. They weren't playing, a couple hundred people club on their next trip through Cleveland. So it did end up closing in 1972.
Yeah, I bet it was amazing. All right, you actually sprinkled it in what you just talked about. Talk a little bit about Record Rendezvous and how important I feel it's almost a cornerstone of why we got to Rock Hall.
I think it is. Like, I don't think if Record Rendezvous wasn't in Cleveland, we would have the Rock Hall. So 300 Prospect Avenue is the address, and in 1938, a businessman named Leo Mintz opened his record store there. He was selling jazz records and blues. Very popular store. So 14 years later, maybe 13 years later, 1951, he had put in listening stations into this store, and this was really cool. So you could go in and listen to music while you're there, and he had been attracting a large crowds of teenagers, black and white teenagers. And he looked around one day, and so the story goes, he said, they're rocking and rolling. So Leo Mintz, coined the term rock and roll there. And when Cleveland did sort of put in its bid to become the Rock Hall, this was certainly something that they cited. And really, just like rock took off then, this was the place to go buy rock records in Cleveland. They were called race records in the early 50s, but that quickly changed. And a DJ named Alan Freed, who you've probably heard of, became a friend of Leo Mintz, and Record Rendezvous sponsored his radio show. So on March 21st, 1952, they had the idea to get together and put on a concert. This is the other main cornerstone of the Rock Hall, I feel. The Moondog Coronation Ball. You've probably heard of that because this is widely regarded as the world's first rock concert. However, it was also, I would say, the world's first rock riot because it ended after like one song. They had sold 20,000 tickets for a 10,000 seat venue. And on the
that's rock and roll.
That is rock and roll. Tickets were like $1.50. And on the Cleveland Press the next day, there was a picture of like a woman's ballet flat, like a bottle of whiskey, and a broken vinyl record. Like that's kind of how it ended. But it truly is a day that will live in infamy, but like a great day for Cleveland.
Oh, absolutely. And the fact, but it kept going on, and you mentioned it, you could listen to a record before you bought it. Yeah. I mean, that was it was an ingenious idea in my mind. And again, got a lot of great upcoming music out in people's living rooms and people's kids' bedrooms. It really caused them to, I'll try this.
But, speaking of new chapters, there is a new chapter for Record Rendezvous, sort of. For years, when I would talk about Record Rendezvous, I would say how sad it was that there was no marker or anything on the building. Like you would walk down Prospect, and there was a dirty old floor mat that said 300. You could barely make out that it said that. It's empty for decades. Within the last 6 months, that space has reopened, and in a very rock and roll way. It is now a dispensary, cannabis dispensary. But it looks really cool. They put like old Victrolas and record players and stuff in the windows. So if you happen to find yourself on Prospect Avenue,
and
you might want to walk by. Yeah.
It definitely is a fun transition for the space. I think we have had a night on this topic more than any other topic, and you had a great chapter on it, Millionaires Row. Clevelanders always want to hear more about Millionaires Row, what it was, how it transitioned, how it grew, but then how it fell.
Yeah, you can't talk about Cleveland and Lost Cleveland in particular without talking about Millionaires Row. That's because this street from about East 9th to East 55th was once considered Euclid Avenue, of course, if I didn't say that. It was once considered one of the most beautiful streets in the world. It was compared to the Champs-Élysées, It was stunning, and that's because there were more than 40 grand mansions, and I do mean grand mansions built on that street then. Why? Because Cleveland was a fabulously wealthy city. We had so much industry here. The houses started being built in the late 1800s, so the earliest house is one of the few that's still standing, actually. The Steger Beckwith Mansion is very Victorian. Up through the Mather Mansion, which is actually one of the ones still standing. But between those, and that was built in the 30s, between those, there were close to 40 other houses built, and they were amazing. One of my favorite stories about Millionaires Row is that of Samuel Andrews, or Andrews Folly. He was a co-founder of Standard Oil with John D. Rockefeller, and he had a lot of money to play with. So he built himself a 100-room mansion at Euclid and East 30th. He had hoped that Queen Victoria would come. That's how lofty his ideals were. And it became known as Andrew's Folly because it was so big that even he, with all of his money and all of his servants, couldn't take care of it. And his family didn't even live there very long. And that one was, like many of the others, demolished. And there's no trace of it at all anymore. His was a unique story. Most of the others were abandoned because the people who were living there, these famous names you hear in Cleveland history, ended up moving further east. Like us regular people were moving into the city. They didn't want to live by us, and it was becoming more polluted. So they moved out to, Gates Mills, East Cleveland, Moreland Hills, Shaker Heights, places like that. And most of their houses were too big for other people to buy. They sometimes became rooming houses. They sometimes were demolished. Some were demolished for the inner belt when that came in. And today, except for picture books, there's very few ways to, look at the beauty of these houses. I mentioned the Mather Mansion is still there. It's on Cleveland State, and that was the most expensive mansion. And if you've ever gone to the Cleveland Children's Museum, that is the first house on Millionaires Road that I mentioned. It's far less glamorous than a lot of the others, but it's still, worth a visit.
But guys, I don't think you have any sense for when she says a mansion. Of course, you might drive through sections of some other parts of town, Shaker Heights maybe particularly, and see these very large houses. Triple them. Triple the size. These were gigantic. He built one that was 100 rooms, but most of them had 20 and 30 bedrooms. Almost all of them had a ballroom on the top floor. These were gigantic. They were beyond anything built anywhere almost today.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And they really took up the whole block, from Euclid back to Chester, that would be there. With the yards and the grounds and everything.
And you could do a whole book on the gardens, that they became competitive with each other on the gardens. But I don't remember if you touched on it. It became a neighborhood. This is where these people lived. It's where John D. Rockefeller lived. And so, it was a neighborhood. They used to have sleigh races down Euclid Avenue, and they became such a popular event. This was all the wealthy people with their horses and sleighs racing down Euclid Avenue, having races with each other. The regular citizenry set up booths to place bets on who would win, the sleigh race. Was it John D. one night or not?
Yeah.
It was a time and a place, I got to tell you.
If you ever watched Gilded Age on HBO, it sort of gives you a sense of what it was like. And speaking of Gilded Age, I don't know if you remember from season 2, the con woman. She was based on a Millionaires Row resident. Her name was Cassie Chadwick.
Yes.
She claimed to be Andrew Carnegie's daughter, and she was ripping off the people of Cleveland Millionaires Row, pretending to be this grand lady, and she was not. It's an infamous con woman from our town.
Yeah, I love that she exists. All right, I'm going to jump to something. I do. I'm going to jump something. I don't want to surprise you because you and I talked maybe what we would talk about, but one of my favorite lost stories is Huff Bakery.
Yeah. Well, I think it's everybody else's too, based on this reaction. It's I call that the big three, downtown shopping stores, Huff Bakery, and Euclid Beach Park. I did experience Huff myself. I love Huff, the daffodil cakes, the hot cross buns. So Huff Bakery went back to the Huff neighborhood. I think it was 1904 that the family, was a Scottish family, came to America, started the bakery, went from one bakery to about 100. And they even had little bakeries in stores. Like if you come downtown to, Higbee's, I think, had a Huff Bakery in there. So it really was the taste of Cleveland, right? Literally, if you think about Easter, you may be thinking about a daffodil cake or something. So beloved bakery. I think they really just overextended. There were just so many Huff bakeries, just 100. But for a while, until recently, you probably know Huff. The taste of Huff was living on at Archie's, over in First Lakeshore and then Beechwood. He's closed now. I don't know if that's temporarily or not. But yeah, no, Huff Bakery in the white and blue boxes. That certainly is a really nostalgic memory for so many people.
I had a Huff Bakery birthday cake every year until I was like 15. It was amazing. But you know what I remember the most were the tea sandwiches. My grandmother would get these trays from Huff Bakery of these little tea sandwiches, they were called. They'd cut off the crust and they'd have like a tuna fish and
I don't know those.
They were just amazing.
One of the really, I think, touching things about Huff, and I have a picture of this in the book, is that is a picture of all these women lined up on VJ Day to go buy Huff cakes to celebrate. Like, that's how important it was to Clevelanders on this sort of mass world moment that they went to Huff to get something.
Yeah, for sure. All right, so how many years? So you had to get this done pretty quickly. I mean, I'm impressed with that part of this story. How you got this done in 1 year?
I did.
All right. So along the way, as you started exploring all of this, what do you think was your coolest discovery?
Gosh. I found a fun little family-related thing when I was doing it that ties a little bit to a story in the book. So I was researching Holland Hotel, the hotel I mentioned by the Short Vincent Street there, and it was a very famous hotel for many years, and a lot of cool things happened there. Like, for example, the NFL charter was signed there, and a star was born there, in fact, because a man started performing there in the Vogue room, and he was told his name was too ethnic. His name was Dino Crocetti. He changed it to Dean Martin. But so that's a great story. But I love that vignette. But in the course of researching some of this, I did find out that my family and the Crocetti family lived right across. They immigrated from the same part of Italy and lived across from one another in Steubenville before coming to Cleveland, and were distantly related.
Oh my gosh!
So that didn't make it in the book, but that was a pretty fun thing I found out when I was writing it.
All right. Along the way, as you started putting it all together, and it's a lengthy book. How much we've lost.
But easy to read.
I know it is. You can what I love about it is you can just open it to any page and just start reading. You don't have. It's just such a great book to just sit down and pick up and just start reading anywhere. But how angry did you get along the way in producing this book? In writing this book, in terms of what we have let slip away. I read the book and sometimes I get pretty mad, because why is this gone?
I say get more sad than mad. I should add, too, that this book led me 2 years later to publish a book called Cleveland Then and Now, which is about transformed spaces, the spaces that we did preserve in Cleveland, like places like Playhouse Square that are still there, or the Nine, the Ameritrust Tower, which are still there. So because we did lose a lot, so I didn't want to just be telling all the negative story about what was gone, but I wanted people to appreciate that. So, it was hard. Like, I think because I feel like we have been becoming more preservation-minded. I think the one that really hit home was the last loss in the book, which was the Fifth Church of Christ Scientists over in Lakewood there. The Lakewood-Cleveland border, which was really just so beautiful, and it just sat empty for like a decade as people just wrung their hands to talk about what to do with this like amazing architectural space, and it ended up being demolished. So it was really hard to see something like that in an era so close to ours that was still happening. And it doesn't happen nearly that much anymore. We have a lot of great preservation going on, but that one I felt was
well, another
sad.
one though. I mean, if you were to identify something that you wished was preserved, what would be your first choice that you wished was still here?
I think that the downtown department stores. I would love to see the Bond store still there. I mean, it was so cool looking, and I would just love to be in, able to walk around downtown and go into Hallie's again or Higbee's. I really miss that a lot, and that is one of my earliest personal memories was going down with my mom and grandma to Higbee's, to the Silver Grill. So to me, that's what I miss the most, the stores.
Oh, I love that because I miss them too. Taking the rapid right into Terminal Tower and then going up the stairs and just being amazed.
It's not the same that it's a casino now. It's cool, but not the same. Yeah.
No. Do you have anything right now that you are afraid we're going to lose? Something that certainly not the stadium on the lakefront here.
Well, I was really happy to hear that the Warner and Swayze building is going to be restored, so that's great to be mixed-use space. As I said, I think we're really getting much better as a city and a region at preservation. I'm so happy about the redevelopment and the money being spent on West Side Market, because that is such a treasure. No one else in America has anything like that. I think it's without hope, but I do wish the old observatory in East Cleveland could have been saved. It's such a cool building. It's just a really sad ruin there right now. I have been out there to take pictures and to see it, and it's broken glass and really tragic because it was really a world-class, just architecturally super cool building over there.
Yeah, I run across those all the time.
Yeah.
I see some of the things that are just literally going to waste around. All right, I've got one last one that I'd like you to talk about, and I hadn't really mentioned it to you. The Memphis Drive-In. First of all, where was it? Make sure you say where was it and what was it?
It's funny you mentioned that because I almost said that is what I wish had been preserved, because that is a part of my childhood, going to the Memphis Drive-In. I was going to say it's where American Greetings is, but it's where American Greetings was. So it's over on by Tiedemann there in Brooklyn. There used to be so many drive-ins, right? Drive-ins were a part of American culture. I feel lucky in Cleveland that we still have the Autorama out there in North Ridgeville we can go to. But Memphis Drive-In, it was just, it's like a slice of Americana. And I don't know if it's necessarily an architectural loss, because it was just those little things, that you put the speakers in your car. I don't even know what those are called. But it was great. And then when it was bought, and American Greetings put their facility there, and as I said, they moved out to Crocker Park. So that's pretty sad.
Yeah, it is. But again, the best part of every drive-in was the concession stand. So you saw everything going on there. I never watched the movies. All right, folks. Let's turn it over to the audience for some questions. Oh, way at the back. Yell it out. You're waving your hands. Yep. Say again. Franklin Castle.
Yeah.
Again, not so lost. It's under renovation now. Mm-hmm. You can stay there, I think. I think it's turned into a type of a hotel, right?
Yeah, more like a B&B, I would say. Last year, even one of the national liquor chains, it might have been Cutwater or somebody, was giving away a stay in Cleveland's Franklin Castle as a prize. Franklin Castle, if you don't know, is a very old German-built castle over in Ohio City. It has the craziest stories in Cleveland history associated with it, such as there was a Nazi massacre and a secret hidden room there. I mean, I feel like that would have gotten more media attention if it took place, but maybe it's true. Hans Tiedemann was the builder of it. Two references to Tiedemann in two sentences there. So his family did suffer a lot of tragedy, which is kind of one reason it is considered haunted. And there have been two major fires there, but just within the last decade, it was bought. It's owned by someone from Europe, and they've really wonderfully restored it, and you can go stay there now.
And folks, we'll have it again the week of Halloween. a fella that writes Cleveland ghost stories. He actually lived in the Franklin Castle for 3 years before any renovations. And he'd been writing Cleveland ghost stories and decided to move into one of the most famous ghost houses in Cleveland. And he went in skeptical. I mean, he wrote ghost story, but he didn't believe in any of it. 3 years later, he believes a lot in ghosts. So come in October. It's going to be a great night. Other questions from the audience, guy? Go ahead, yell it out from the. All right, so question is, how did we lose J.D. Rockefeller? You're right, he moved out of Cleveland. How did that happen? Do you know any of the background on that, Laura?
Well, he moved Standard Oil to New York, and he just moved there with his wife. And he never came back until he died. He's buried here with that big obelisk out there at Lakeview Cemetery. I don't know really the specifics about it. I assume running a company of that size, just being in Manhattan probably was, the place to be.
Yeah, but I think it did have something to do with some tax situation that they were going to levy here in Cleveland against him, and he just said, "I'll leave," and he did. So. Right. Yeah. Right. So that's classic Cleveland. All right. So yell it out.
On the same topic, what about the Rockefeller building, which has been vacant for decades as well?
But-
Is there any hope that will not be torn down?
All right. So the question is, how about the Rockefeller building? It's been vacant for years. Is there any hope that that won't be torn down and maybe finally renovated and used?
Yeah, I think it's likely that it won't be torn down. It's been in the news a lot lately. From what I've heard, it's in poor shape inside, but not outside, and there is interest in it. And I think the last sale price was fairly cheap for those how those things go. So I think there's a lot of interest from stakeholders in preserving that.
Yeah, hope so too. Other questions, guys? Am I missing anybody? Repeat the question. Did you hear it?
I couldn't hear.
Sorry, yell it out a little better.
I don't know about that. I'll have to
Yeah,
look
I don't
that
know
up.
either. The Teller building you're saying. Soder and Sons.
Okay. I'll have to look that up.
We'll
Thanks
have to
for
look
the
it
tip.
up. There's one we don't know about. All right. There was one right here. Yell it out. La Cave, again, was in the same neighborhood, actually, as Leo's Casino.
Yeah. La Cave is, obviously famous for being a very cool, hip club over by Leo's Casino, but also by Case. So there's a lot of college students going there. One of the first places for the Velvet Underground to play outside of New York City. Whereas Leo's Casino was more like Motown, soul, jazz. La Cave was folk, burgeoning like rock and roll. I mean, it was a really cool, hip club over there. And I talk about that briefly, but there's not a whole chapter about La Cave. But when I was at the Plain Dealer, I did write about La Cave, and as did my husband John over there, who's written a lot about rock and roll for the Plain Dealer over the years.
I actually think it was the first place in Cleveland Simon and Garfunkel performed, as an example. Go ahead, yell it out. Greenhouses in South Hills.
No, not much. I'm sorry.
Ah,
In Old Brooklyn, you mean?
yeah.
I do not. No.
That's cool. A story about giant greenhouses.
I'm getting some good story tips tonight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Very cool. All right. What's next? You said a little bit. You hinted about it, that you're working on something new. You said you couldn't say much, but what's next for you?
So, after I lost Cleveland and Cleveland Then and Now, I turned my attention to Mark Twain. I wrote a book about Mark Twain and then the Civil War, but I'm turning back to Cleveland for my 5th book, something that will come out end of 2027 is the goal. And like I said, I can't say much, but I'll just say that I'm going back way earlier than Lost Cleveland. I've been researching maps of French explorers that feature this region and like native indigenous peoples to the area. So it's going to start before Cleveland was Cleveland.
Before Moses.
And then it's going to come up to a lot more present day too. So it's a big project, but I'm really excited to get started on it. Maybe, come back to Music Box in a couple
you
years.
will. I promise you. Big round of applause, guys, for Laura. Please, on your way out, stop. She's going to be at a table. She'll answer some more questions. She will sign her book out there. Take a look at the book, guys. It's spectacular. All those pictures you saw during dinner are in the book, and I got to tell you, it's one of my favorite books in my collection. Good night, everyone. Please go home safely.
Thank you.